up, our little honeydews, and welcome back to Sippin N B, where the drinks are icy and the book talk is exciting and spicy. It's not really spicy today, but it's exciting. We are on episode 9, part 16, the best for last, the end of the end. It's the end of an era, really. Really. But we're your main bitches. I'm Sam.
I'm Steph.
I was wondering how
Sometimes.
long-winded I can make that.
Yeah, I was wondering how far you were gonna go. There is some spice, but I completely just ignored it
I did.
because that wasn't the point. That wasn't the points of the things that we were talking about. If you're listening to this on drop day last week, our Lord and Savior Jennifer announced that. Well, honestly, it's probably like a week and a half ago. By the time you're listening to this, I digress. Anyway, she did the cover reveal for Primal of Blood and Bone, so we're kind of reeling on that. And when she announced the cover, she also shared an excerpt from chapter 1 of that book. We
That's
are
insane.
actually releasing a little extra bonus episode just talking about the teaser, talking about the cover, because we have thoughts. So stay tuned for that. That might drop tomorrow when you're listening to this. You know, we'll see what's in the cards for us. But it was very exciting. We freaked out. If you watched our TikTok, I was on the treadmill and luckily I didn't fall because
You
that would
looked
have been
great.
awkward. It would have been. I was sweating. It was listen, you gotta do it. You gotta do it for the people at I don't know, sure. Like we have been for the past 15 other episodes, we are going to start with the note to the reader. As Sam said, this is the end of this era. And I will say, when we get to it, I didn't realize how full circle the end of this book is because I think I blacked out. I just
At least you're
didn't.
honest.
I just didn't really process half of this. So rereading it was really nice. Okay, note to the reader. This book contains themes and or discussions that some readers may find difficult to read. While there are no graphic scenes, there is mention of sexual assault, suicide, the death of children, and discussions of verbal, psychological, and physical abuse. If you need to talk with somebody about your experiences, there are people waiting to help, and the resources will be down in the description down below. I will say that it's not as intense, but it is still mentioned in these last few chapters. It's definitely mentioned in the epilogue, so.
Yeah,
Period.
it's mentioned in my chapters too. In a good way though, in a very good way. So we're starting strong with chapter 64. As we mentioned last time, it is a 2-month jump. After they have dealt with Colus's cranky ass and put his consensual necrophilia self in the ground. It says we had just finished breakfast and should be getting ready. The other primals and gods wanted a celebration, and Ash and I not only thought it was a good idea, but also figured it was time. The last several weeks had been for mourning those we'd lost, and this event was to celebrate their memories as much as it was to mark our victory. The event would be at the city hall, and Rain was running around like a madman. He would probably have a breakdown if he knew what we were doing. Because what were they doing? They're having sex, of course.
Yeah, well.
And she's saying if we're late, Rain will be so mad. And he said, we'll just tell him we took our time with dessert. Oh, which is such a them thing. But one thing, I'm gonna basically skip the sex because it's great, but it's not what we're here for. But one thing to note is they had been making a lot of progress where her trauma involved with him feeding from her was involved. It said, over the last 2 months, we've been slowly working together to overcome my trauma related to feeding. Maybe overcome wasn't the right word. I'd come to believe that trauma wasn't always something you could overcome and no longer be affected by. The mind didn't work that way. Be you mortal, god, or primal. Trauma stayed with you, sometimes returning at night or during the quieter parts of the day. Other times, it disappeared for days or weeks, but I was beginning to live with it, to acknowledge it and then handle it, just like I had when it came to my anxiety. Neither were the sum of who I was. It was just a part of who I was. So remember that. Growth.
Progress.
But healing. In this scene, healing. In this scene particularly, she had a little bit of unease, but was able to get over it and was ready for a full-on bite. And boy, did he give it to her. Skipping. Here we go. As they are finishing up, she says, "Do you feel that?" He makes an inappropriate comment. And she says, "I'm talking about our hearts, focus. They're beating in sync, aren't they?" And he says, "I think they are. I think it's because we're mates of the heart. But this is the first time I fed from you since you awakened." And he says, "It's like the bond, right? I think having your blood in me is like a final connection." Which I wonder if this is how they also come to like figure out how the joining works. Because it's just...
Okay, but if we go with that logic, well, yeah, if we go with that logic, I guess it doesn't confirm that they are joined to somebody else, though. So I think
No,
my
it's just
statement
them.
was
It's their
going,
bond
yeah.
together.
So that's what I was gonna say. Then I feel like they should share some things, you know?
They can't bond with Nectus, though. Because they
I
can't
didn't
drink his
even say that.
blood.
I didn't
Yeah, but
even
you're
say that.
thinking it. But that's what you were thinking.
I'm just saying they should be able to shift into each other's, they should just... Anyway, continue.
God. Anyways. So they're realizing that their hearts are in sync, and it's super cute. And then Ash says, "We need to get ready since you made us late." And she says, "I made us late?" And he says, "That's what I'm telling Rain." And then he tells her to be good. And she said, "I laughed as our eyes met, and God's what I saw in his stare made my heart skip. It was utter devotion. I clasped his cool cheeks. How did I get so lucky to have your love?" He said, "You weren't lucky, Liesa. I was." And that's all of chapter 64. So it's a very sweet chapter about like overcoming some anxieties and realizing
This episode, really, we probably could have fit it in last minute, but we're doing a shorter one. It's fine.
No. We could have, but then we wouldn't have the excerpts that were released today to talk about.
Correct. That is
So,
also, divine intervention or something.
She's holding Reaver's hand and cradling Jadis, and she's thinking it's practice for the future. And I just think it's cute because they're cute. And she knows that the whole time she's been doing stuff today, Ash's gaze has been following her. So has Rain and Nectus's. They shared with Rain a month ago that they were expecting, so he could assist in gathering information. They want to tell everyone, but they've been waiting for a peaceful moment because the last 2 months have been a lot of outbursts of violence in several of the courts.
You don't say.
Yeah, overthrowing a kingdom comes with overthrowing people trying to overthrow again. It's the Seer numbers have been severely depleted, but they were still out there with only a few swearing allegiance to Scion. Oh, we know we hadn't rounded up all the revenants, but they would. And then there's still Draken that are loyal to Colas that they're dealing with. It wasn't until the last few days after entombing Colas that they remembered about Sax, the Draken who once served Ethos, when she'd asked Nectus if he had sent Sax in the Bonelands. He shared that he hadn't joined the fight, and so they didn't know if he was dead or not, but they're looking for him.
I hope. Okay, hear me out. Remember when we first brought up Sax and how we were talking about how whatever?
Yeah.
I'm just saying. You think I'm gonna forget this, Jennifer? But mark my words on this podcast that I know you listen to. Sax is coming back in this next book, which I have so many thoughts I just want to say about this next book, but I won't. Oh yeah, he better. That's what he better. Like, you can't introduce a character and then not show him ever again.
Yep. So she can feel their eyes on her, being the protective hens all three of these men are. They decided not to eat on the dais like two supreme rulers. They wanted, but Ethon was stretched out before the thrones, watching over everything. What? It might be the last time I get to do that.
If Ethan is not in this next book, I don't know what to do with life.
I will throw hands if Ethon is not there. Oh man.
Oh no. He has to have been one of the ones that they woke up.
I feel like that would have been mentioned though, like Aurelie. Like they didn't
Yeah.
say names. They said the names of them. I don't remember Ethon being one of them.
Yes, but also that last book came out before this book, so we don't know the full impact of Ethon until now.
Yeah, but I still don't remember. We'll have to go back and see the Draken's names that were there. Anyways, Ethon is stretched out before the thrones. Oh, what? What?
No, but what if never mind, it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's fine. It's
You
fine.
can't. For those not watching the video, she had quite a like brain blast moment and then settled back
I'm
down.
just saying, like, what if he ended up going wherever, like, what if he's grouped with like the other people and like he's separate from the, you know, like maybe he's just separate in a different island.
Yeah, I'm not saying he's not one of them. I'm just saying I'm saying he's probably not one of the ones that were first woken up, but I doubt they woke up all the Draken. So
Poppy, get your life together. Anyway.
Anyways, he's in front of the thrones. And her heart pangs for the loss of Crowley and Cars. And
Cars is giving Elijah energy.
Oh, that's sad.
I'm on it. Cars
You're
is
not
the real
wrong.
MVP.
It's just sad.
Like truly, the most underrated player in this game is Cars. I'm just saying. I was thinking about it. I was like, Cars reminds me of Elijah, but like in like a. Anyway, I'm gonna stop because I'm gonna get sad.
Used on a catapult.
I'm gonna stop because it makes me sad now.
Okay, so they she wasn't sad about everyone's death. She was conflicted about Vessis. She's not sad she's gone, but you know, trauma shit. But then she sees Addis, the lone figure with a bottle of liquor. She said she'd seen him often these last 2 months when he wasn't in Vathi assisting Layla with establishing her rule and preparing Theon. He was in the Shadowlands. Ash said it was because being in Vathi reminded him too much of his brother. And cute little Reaver butt picking up on her emotions, asking why she's sad. And she said that she was thinking about those we missed. Gosh dang it. All the yawning today. She was thinking about those they miss, and he says, I think about my parents sometimes. I don't remember much about them, but I miss them. And she says, does thinking about them make you sad? And he says, yes, but Neck told me that it's a good kind of sadness to have because it means you remember them, and memories will keep them alive with you. And she tells him that's very true. Your father is very wise. And her calling Nectus his father is just like, it's like my heart happy. My heart happy. This is so cute. And so she heads over to where Belle and Ios and Ione are. Ione has been attempting to catch an impression of Sartoria's soul. We weren't sure if it's possible since it's held in the star. She says not yet. She's thinking of entering the mortal realm to see if it helps. And it says, instinct told me that Callum was likely in possession of her soul, and it would be wise of him to stay far away from Elysium. But how long could he get by in the mortal realm? Theron had also been traveling through the dreams to see if he could pick up anything, which was highly disturbing to think about. I need to stop yawning. Holy hell. But we weren't even sure if what Callum could dream. That was something I hadn't considered till Theron mentioned it. And then they have this whole bit about Jadis nibbling on hair. And Sarah's gonna take him back to Nectus. And it says, as I rounded the table, Ash's gaze followed me. I had to bite the inside of my lip to keep myself from smiling. I came up behind Nectus. I have something for you. And he shifted back and lifted his hands. Jadis reached for her father with one arm, and he says, you need to let go of her hair. For a second, it seemed like she would, but then she does. And she basically says, hey, can you keep Ash company so he doesn't get lonely, basically. And she goes back over to where Addis is. It says that Addis didn't look at me as I approached, but he gave an elaborate bow. She says, surprised to see you standing in the shadows. And he says, I know, it does seem like something your husband would do. And then he says, there's no real reason. She said, I knew that was a lie as I studied his profile. In the last 2 months, there had been moments when Addis seemed more like his old self. He'd do his level best to annoy Ash. He'd laugh, he'd smile, but I only saw the dimples appear when he'd been driving Layla mad about something. Then there were all the other moments where he looked like he hadn't slept in several days. What concerned me the most was that more and more his features were utterly impassive, like he felt absolutely nothing. And Addis said, please don't ask if I'm okay. I am. And she says, I won't ask, but I also know you're not. And they glance at Layla, who is dancing with someone, and she says, who is she dancing with? And he said, a jackass. And she said, then why aren't you dancing with her? And he said, because I'm a worse jackass. And then he finally tells her that it's time. And we're referring to him wanting to do the sleep. And she asks when, and he says tomorrow. I've stayed longer than I planned. Layla is ready, so is Theon. Vathy will be in good hands. He says, don't, and she says, what am I not to do now? And he says, be sad. He says, I'm not dying, Sarah. I'm just going into stasis. I will be resting. She says, I was hoping you wouldn't be ready. I will miss you. And then she says, you better not take too long. I feel as if we'll need your aid when it comes to keeping track of these two, patting her stomach. And he says, not sure you really want my influence. And she says, I'm pretty sure I do. You're a good man. And she kisses his cheek. And he says, and I think you're trying to get me murdered before I can even go into stasis, because there was a growl coming from where Ash was. And then she sees Victor and Penelope are here. And Addis says, I'm going to go annoy your husband by complimenting how lovely you look in your gown. And she says, I thought you were worried about being murdered by him. And he said, I decided watching him struggle not to throttle me is worth the risk.
He's going to be the coolest uncle I've ever seen ever.
Right? Anyway, she makes her way over to our lovely Victor, whom we love and adore.
Victor.
He says, I hear congratulations are in order. And then she worries it's noticeable, then realizes that Holland told her. He says he wanted you to know that he's thrilled. He would have given the message to Penelope, but he hasn't told her. He knows it's wise for only a few to know at this time. And he also knows Penelope will be too excited not to blurt it out, which mood, honestly. They're talking about Satoria and how she would probably have a Victor assigned to her when she is reborn. And he says, I can't say for sure, but she will usher in great change. And Sarah says she'll do more than that. And then she says, Holland said that none of my bloodline has ever hungered for power, even those who held power. If she is reborn and given a Victor, I want it to be you. I plan to get a message to Holland to let him know that I have requested this. I don't think he'll refuse. I feel like he owes me. It's not for you. If not for you, I would not be standing here today. You saved my namesake, and likely my life in Lotho. I trust you. And he says, you barely know me. And she says, I know you would not kill a child. And he sighs with relief, and because he was actually worried that she was going to ask what his queen once asked of her. And she's like, I would never ask you to kill a child, but she will be more than just a child. Whether she hungers for power or not, she will wake the ancients. And Sarah says, I know, but until then, she will be a child. One day she'll become a great and powerful being, but she... And then she kind of pauses and said, Colas will be aware of her from the moment she's born. It may take him years after to free himself, but he will do so, and he will come for her. I doubt we will get lucky and have... Let's get a yawn counter going. I doubt we will get lucky and have him only find her after he rises as this primal. She will have no real memory of herself or of Colas, but he will do... and what he will do to her, and I assume the fates will demand that nobody warn her in order to keep the balance. She needs to be trained to defend herself, just as you trained the Silver Knight, just as Holland trained me. And he's quiet for a moment and says, I will do as you ask. I will serve as her victor with honor, and I will not fail you. I will not fail her.
The fact that you go back to when he dies and he like just
And he says sorry for failing to protect her. Like, oh.
Jennifer, your full circle moments just are too much for me. It's fine. It's fine.
Anyways.
We still we see him back and he comes back, hopefully.
So she's back to sitting with Ash. I can't think about the Victor thing anymore. It's really heartbreaking. It says, my gaze flickered over those before us. I smiled at seeing Belle and Eos finally dancing, holding each other as they slowly swayed, completely offbeat with the lively music. Layla had joined Theon, both moving to sit opposite Addis. For once, Theon wasn't looking at Addis like he wished to punch him. They were actually having a conversation. I think it had a lot to do with the god sitting next to Layla. It turned out he wasn't an asshole. He was one of Addis's generals. Farther down the table, Theron had joined Ione and Penelope. Ward was with them, and they were watching a card game between Sion and Rahar that had grown to include Rain. Aurelie is now on the side of Nectis, wearing a linen gown. It's her first time seeing her in her mortal form. She had an earthy beauty to her and a husky, infectious laugh. I caught Nectis' lips curving up at the sound of it more than once, as we all simply enjoyed one another's company. Family. This is what all of them were to me. To Ash, family. With them, I would always be seen, accepted. With them, I knew it would one day be easier to accept and live with the terrible things I'd done and experienced. That's what family did. And I would do everything in my power to protect them, just like we would do everything we could to ensure that a powerful being like a primal of blood and bone wasn't created from our union. Our sons would too. They had to. Sorry to tell you, honey. The future wasn't completely written in stone. There were choices, free will. There were things that not even the fates could predict. There was love. What had not come to pass could be altered. I knew that. I believed in that. But the two daughters had been promised eons ago. The rise of a great primal of life and death had been seen. The remaking of the realm and the end had been foretold. When I looked down at Reaver, I knew in my heart and felt it written in my bones that she would return. The true focus of the prophecy, the harbinger that would set Cullis free, unleashing death and destruction. She who would awaken the ancients and leave the realms in ruin. It had all started with her, and it would end with her, the one who was the beginning and the end. I didn't even realize the impact of that sentence until just now. It all I'm sorry, all being Satoria is still, like, hitting me in different ways. The Queen of Flesh and Fire, Satoria reborn, the primal of blood and ash. So when the day came, we would be ready. Until then, Ash squeezed my hand. I looked over at him. Nyktos, my king, my husband, my everything. His lips moved in a silent I love you. Until then, we wouldn't waste a fucking second.
I'm sorry. Let's just rewind back up. Let me tell you how this entire series, I thought the Queen of Flesh and Fire was Sarah. It is not Sarah. It is Satoria.
Yeah. That's why that hit me when it's like the one who was the beginning and the end. At first I was like, what? And I was like, oh shit, no, Satoria, because it started with Satoria and it has to end with Satoria.
She's like a main character without even being a main character.
She's
you know
the
how
most main character, side character I've ever met.
That's like wild. Absolutely wild. That was how the book ends, by the way.
Yeah, that was the last chapter. She's like, it's just the fact that she was at first just a story of what happened to a girl, and it's like, no, she's it. She's
the foundation of the books without even understanding the foundation of the books.
Now we have 2 epilogues.
Yes. So there are 2 epilogues. One is called The One Who Was Blessed, and then the second one is called The Star. The One Who Was Blessed, essentially it is, it fast forwards to the end of Sarah's pregnancy. Nyktos is looking over new building plans for housing in Vathi, that both Layla and Theon had signed off on. And Sarah is very pregnant, and he is feeling so many emotions. One is love, first and foremost, causing the essence to thrum intensely in his veins. He'd never thought it would be possible to feel such love for her and his babes, their sons he'd yet to look upon. Unsurprisingly, the second emotion was desire, and it was just as intense as
Shocker.
the sweeter, softer one, striking him hard in the gut. Most days he just had to look at her. Ash, for the love of God, for his dick to get hard, but as their babes grew in her, he found it incredibly difficult not to walk around with a raging arousal. As her stomach grew, she became even more beautiful and sexier to him. Perhaps it was the glow to her skin that reminded him of the late summer sun, an actual golden glow that had been seen the last 2 months. It could also be the visual reminder of what their love and passion had created that fueled his lust. The only thing that cooled his desire was the final set of emotions: concern, anxiety, and fear. Sleep was more difficult. She needed to feed almost daily, and she was supposed to be resting, but in true Sarah fashion, she is not. She did have some bleeding, so everyone's just on edge. And so he's having his full horny moment in true Ash fashion, and he was just like, I'm not, like, it's not safe for her, like, I can hold off, I would always wait for her. Ash, please, for the love of cheese.
How horrible. You have to go a couple months without the sexy time.
And Sarah's like, I don't want to rest. When I rest, my mind wanders. And she's like, where didn't it wander? What really occupied her thoughts was their living situation. They discussed whether to stay in the Shadowlands or to take up residency in Deos. A palace was being built there, one that would not reek of Colus's stench. A lot was being done in the court to erase Colus's rule and show everyone who the true primal of life was. The statue being erected revealed it was a queen who truly ruled, despite what the mortals believed. At first, neither of them had any desire to leave the Shadowlands. Even with the changes being made, Deos was still a place of bad memories for them. It would take a very long time, if ever, for that to change, but as time passed, a glow had started up in her eyes when she spoke about Deos, a bone-deep need to be there, tied to the essence pumping through her veins. It was her seat of power, after all. But that was the thing, Sarah had no thirst for power. Also, okay, so she says that they don't have to choose, they could live in both places. But now I'm cutting to From Blood and Ash, and the fact that Poppy and, like, they're told specifically to not go into Deos. I'm thinking that's the one place that, like, I feel like that's, like, their place. It's like a museum. It's like an artifact that, like, you can't touch nothing, you know?
I
But, like,
think it was more because of who Poppy was. It would have caused the gods to start waking up. Like, Sarah would have felt it, and it would have caused her to wake up, which is what would have caused the rest of the gods to wake up. I feel like Jennifer said something along those lines.
still have an empty pedestal, by the way. I don't. The
Yeah,
pedestal is not
shut up.
mentioned in the epilogues. Anyway, and he also. There's also a mention that there were still moments when she fought her thoughts to stop them from taking her back to when she was in Deos. He hated them because he loathed that the bastard still plagued her, would likely always do so in some shape or form, but he was never prouder of her than in these moments when there was no hesitation, because she was strong enough to not let the memories take hold, because she was able to beat them back when they did, which is great. And he asks her how she's doing, and she feels fine. And he has a cute little full circle freckle moment, and she has 36 freckles. And sometimes nightmares found her, not of her time being held by Colas. He knew, because the aftermath of those nightmares tasted of the sourness of shame. These were nightmares birthed of what she had done after the bastard struck out at Lysania. I miss Ezra. Anyway, moving on. And she asks if these are the new housing plans for Vathi and if there'll be enough. And he says yes. Kin did very little with much of his portion of Vathi. There's more than enough land to build new housing without encroaching upon the areas used for crops. I also forgot that Attis is sleeping, so I'm sad. And she is also sad. She misses him, and Ash says Attis will return. And he gets jealous because, well, he gets jealous. And then they have, some little back and forth sexy banter. and he is just like, well, there is somewhere we can go. And she's like, is it finally what I think it is? And he says, come. And Sarah was a ball of anticipation where she walked beside him, their progress slow as they made their way to the chamber in the east wing of the 3rd floor. It had slipped both of their minds over the last several months with all that had come after entombing Colas. He'd meant to show her before this. Something always came up, though. But not today. Nothing would stop Niktos from showing his wife his paintings, and perhaps, if his queen was not too tired afterward, he would have her sit for him, and he would know exactly which paints it took to capture the pink in her cheeks and the green and silver in her eyes. After all, getting her to blush was easy. Niktos knew just how. So, full circle.
That's
We
a
get the
cute little
paintings.
epilogue. The next
Yeah,
one
that's
is
the
the one
cute
that's
one.
like, oh,
Yeah, the next one is I had some thoughts with the next one. But the next one, called The Star, the one we watched was neither alive nor dead. I like the perspective in which she writes this too, by the way. The one
it's
we
amazing.
watched was neither alive nor dead, neither god nor mortal, yet risen from primal blood. He was something else, an abomination. And yet it was a miracle of creation that even the most jaded had to admire. There were no others like him, but the realms had whispered that another would come, neither dead nor alive, god nor mortal, an abomination, a miracle, a cruel twist of fate. The first daughter, with blood full of fire, fated for the once promised king. I'm not understanding. It's Millie. Like, there's no denying that this is Millie, right? I
The cruel
just,
twist
what
of
does it
fate,
mean?
man.
What does it mean? Anyway, so Callum, if you haven't picked up on it, Callum, we're in Callum's POV. He came back to the place where it all began, the Cliffs of Sorrow. He never stayed long while sitting on the edge, arms wrapped tightly around the brown leather satchel he always carried with him, the one he didn't open. He walked the lands east of the Skotos, then, seeing hidden as the son of primals helped build the new world. He didn't return to the east after wolves were given dual lives by the true primal of life to guide the offspring of mates of the heart. Like the Draken, he was clever enough to suspect that they would sense something off about him. He walked as the pestilence of the most craven. Okay, spread across the mortal realm. Did we hear Craven before this? Other than in From Blood and Ash?
Yes,
okay.
Because she came across them all in Deus.
And that was it, right? There's not like a huge...
And she came across them in the first book too, Sarah did.
So like, it's really a Blood and Ash kind of...
Yeah, we've seen them sporadically, but they're more prevalent in From Blood and Ash.
That's what I thought. Okay. Pestilence spread across more realm. He traveled as the War of Two Kings ignited, forcing the great kingdom to the east to near ruin. He continued as Niktos honored the oath he'd made to the true primal of life. Please note that they're not saying any names here. And one by one, the gods went to sleep to prevent vengeance against those who had harmed her child. Mind you, he's in the background. This man is a background character. I don't know if I can call him a man, but we're going to call him a man because he once was. The one who walked only stopped when he saw her, his hand protectively cradling the leather satchel that had faded from brown to yellow in the centuries that had passed. We waited and watched as he whispered in the new queen's ear, told her more than what the son of primals had even spoken of. We watched as heroes became villains and entire histories were rewritten. We wept when the forgotten symbol of true death was raised throughout the mortal realm, etched in gold and surrounded by crimson. Sorry. And we saw the day he brought the Crimson Queen to the cliffs and for the first time opened the satchel and pulling out the star. We watched as he gave it to the queen and she took possession of it with great care. I'm confused. So like, does she like, how do you take that and how did that?
I don't know. Maybe she drank her soul. I don't know.
Anyway, Poppy's birth stirred death from his slumber. Each year that passed, he grew stronger, and those buried even deeper than him in lands across all the realms began to grow restless. We could not look away when her ascension at the hands of her fated mate released death and woke our brethren in lands beyond the primal veil. We upped again as the tallest mountains erupted, spewing forth flames and clouds that consumed all in their path, boiling the rivers and turning seas into deserts. Really, she's causing global warming, y'all, is really the moral of this story. For as told by the last oracle, they had risen as the ruin and wrath of the once great beginning, and she, the second daughter, with blood full of ash and ice, fated for the future king, summoned the true primal of life, And then Rose is blood and bone. Let me tell you, this is a very full circle. Let me just give you a Cliff Notes version in prophecy talk.
Yeah.
We saw the future that would come, but this end was different. It would be a beginning soaked in blood for every choice from the moment the first victor sacrificed himself to save the Silver Queen to when Satoria fell from the cliffs, when Nikto screamed at the realms and ascended immortal to become the Queen of the Gods, the failure of the first daughter and the birth of the second, the desperate love of a mate to that of a mother's desperation, and every action had been birthed from the same emotion. Whether it was forged from an unending grief between true mates of the heart, or drove a mother to plunge a dagger into the heart of her true mate instead of her daughter, it was all the same. Some great, some terrible, and it had driven the realms to the brink of what was to come. It was the most selfish and altruistic thing in all the realms, more powerful than the ancients, and the only thing that could snap the threads of fate. It was the only hope the realms had now. Love. Let me restate this. It was the most selfish and altruistic thing in all the realms, more powerful than the ancients. Period.
Period.
Period. I don't know. Listen.
Ugh.
All right, listen here. So, this has to go beyond. I mean, I guess at the bare bones, it's the love. It's love. Satoria love, right?
Right.
But say Satoria loves Attis, then what? Does Attis become a main player in this? But Satoria is Poppy. But Poppy is with Cass.
I think the Addis and Satoria thing was like a what could have been situation, and that's why she ended up being a heartmeet with someone descended from him.
Aww, nice little Easter egg, though.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think Layla and Addie's was endgame, and I think that's the line that Cass comes from.
Listen,
But he could also come from the line of Addis's first children that may have survived Colas killing them all. Because she said that some of them could have been hidden away.
True. I'm so conflicted and confused. I just know Poppy. Okay, I can't say too much because now that I've read the first chapter of the next book, I'm like,
Yeah.
There has to be like a duality version of this, right? Where Satoria comes back, right?
Right.
Where maybe she's not a corporeal. Yeah, the words are hard. Corporeal form, right? Or Poppy like summons some sort of thing in her, and like maybe some mumbo gumbo happens.
Well, I'm thinking because there's not a corporeal thing because Poppy is Satoria. It's not a dual soul thing like it was before. But I'm thinking
she has to remember.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that when she goes through this ascension and she's waking up, she not only gets all the knowledge of what has happened before with the ancients and stuff like Sarah did, getting all that foreknowledge and shit. I'm thinking that she will get her memories as Satoria back as well. I'm hoping.
Which also could work.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out where Millie... What happens with
Millie plays some sort of vital role. I don't know what it is.
And she has to, but I don't know. Maybe they like relationship build?
Probably.
What if it... Okay, so hear me out. What if at the end of this book, or not at the end of this book, but because this is the last Poppy and Cass book, in case y'all did not know. This is the last Poppy and Cass book, this next one. What if it becomes like an ACOTAR thing where, like, you know how it's the last book was from Nesta's POV? Like, what if it just switches to Millie's, but they're still characters in the background?
That's what.
But also, what if they like?
Don't say they go to sleep or they go to Arcadia. I don't accept either of those when you say them ever. Ever.
But there's also 3 of them that we have to account for, so I guess they can't get rid of 3 characters, right? Oh,
Jennifer.
No. Yeah, but what happens? Okay, listen, Delano. I just want Delano to stay. I'm going to cry if this is some. I can't. I can't even. I can't.
You shouldn't.
Anyway, Jennifer has released an excerpt for the first chapter, if not the full first chapter, just based off of the length. And we're going to discuss that next. So if you're listening to this, in theory, tomorrow we will have a drop of us freaking out and brainstorming over Primal of Blood and Bone. In terms of this book, I
Didn't
think
wait that long. You should just record it and drop it immediately.
I also could do that. That's also true. But Sippin N B on everything.
Everywhere.
If you don't want spoilers and you want to go into the next book blind, like, don't listen to the next, but we are going to have a bonus episode just for y'all because of the events that happened today. Honestly, it might already be out. It might be out before you're even listening to this. So check that out on your feeds if that's the case, and we just full send it. Which we might, knowing us. It's fine. Anyway, Sippin N B on everything. We'll catch you later, bitches. Please note, we are taking a break for the holidays,
Bye.
but we will bring
Yes.
more to you soon. We'll see. Keep an eye out on our socials for updates on that. Okay, bye.